welcome to the Politics of Survival. Hi, everyone. This is Tara Reade. I'm your host, and we have a great show. Cynthia McKinney is a six-time former congresswoman. She came to Moscow actually twice, one for a geopolitical conference on multipolarism, and the second time was to discuss and to observe international elections that were held in Russia recently. Now, as you all know, we have Victory Day coming in Moscow. Ura! And we have lots going on in festivities in Moscow, and I'm very excited to be observing some of that. I'll be going to the Victory Museum, and I'll post some of that footage here on the channel. But in the meantime, Cynthia wanted to talk about what she observed on the elections, and she was very impressed with the election integrity. And she has been through a lot, and has spent at least 20, 30 years studying electoral integrity. And in particular, she experienced a difficult time in Georgia when she was running again for Congress the last time when they were using electronic machines. So she's going to talk about all of that and more. And we're really happy to have you all here. Please make your comments. You can look for Cynthia's Telegram channel in underneath in the notes. And if you have any questions, I always have my DMs open. You can find me at Reade Alexandra on Twitter, X as they call it now, or at Tara in Exile. So please keep those comments coming. I love to answer questions. Last week, somebody asked me what I would tell people about living in Moscow. What I can tell you is that I am not a city girl. I'm a country girl. I love to live in the country, but I love Moscow. It is by now my favorite city in the whole, and I've been to many cities, major cities in the world, and particularly in the West and European and American countries. And I'm telling you, it is just the most gorgeous city, very efficient, very green. If you want to find nature, you can find it. And I'm very, very happy with the adventures that I have. And I'll be sharing a lot of those adventures on my social media. And soon, look for it. I'm going to try my hand at Instagram again. So look for my Instagram coming. All right, everyone. Now sit back and relax. And we're going to hear from Cynthia McKinney, all the way from Bangladesh, where she now teaches university. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Oh, Cynthia, thank you so much for joining the show. I had such a wonderful time chatting with you when you were here in Moscow. And then we both got to be on Maria Butina's show on Channel 1, which was really interesting too, as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm really, I'm kind of jazzed about it. And the thing about being an activist and working where I work and sort of thing is that as a woman, we don't get to make a lot of girlfriends, right? So even though I'm old enough to be your mom and I can be your mother, but I can be your mother, sister.
I think more
auntie,
sister, because I'm older than you think, so I'm probably sister. Yeah. But we both have youthful spirits.
That's exactly right. So I was really fortunate to have been extended 2 invitations to visit Russia this year at the beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And I accepted both of them right away because the last time I was in Russia was 2016. And then before that, it wasn't Russia, it was the Soviet Union. So,
wow.
My experience and knowledge about that part of the world was a little bit sketchy. So I needed to update myself. After all, I am a teacher. I teach young people, and I try to de-Westernize my students since I'm teaching in Asia. And I don't want them to think that if it's from the West, it's the best. I want them to have a realistic view of the world and of their place in the world, because I want them to assume leadership positions in the world. And so in order to be able to do that effectively and be an effective leader, you have to have sort of the rose-colored glasses. They have to be thrown away. So that's what I try to do with my students. And So these two trips gave me an opportunity to refresh my knowledge about Russia. The second trip, of course, the first trip was about multipolarism. And of course, that's a very, very important topic, just simply because that's the direction in which a lot of us who were peace activists before before there was any, I mean, I've been a peace activist like literally all of my adult life, and so the idea that one day you could demilitarize the United States in such a way that would give dignity to other civilizations, other cultures, other peoples around the world, and hopefully inside the United States as well, was like a dream. It was like a far off dream. But now we actually have intellectuals, we have thinkers, even a few politicians that are saying, yeah, the multipolar world is for now. And they are actually working on it. And organizations like BRICS, which the Russians have presidency of in 2024, are making strides in that direction. So, but I tell my students that you really can't be a leader for your people, or at least an effective leader for your people, until you have shed your Eurocentrism. Your idea that European values, European history, European culture, European language, everything European. And when I say European, I also mean the US, because the United States kind of assumed the role from the colonial period as the master of all of the colonizers. So I mean the US as well. And you cannot be effective for your people if you still believe that the West is the best. You've got to say, okay, maybe the West is good at this and maybe the West is good at that, but we also are good, or we can be better at this. And we've got to, and I say we, but I want them to focus on making their own country the best. So anyway, I have lots of fun doing what I do. Like you say, that youthful spirit, it keeps me young, being around all the young people. And then the second trip to Russia was really interesting because, the other challenge in dealing with the young people here is that I have to
Excuse me. And when you say here,
sensitize.
I want to emphasize to my audience that although you're American right now, you're in Bangladesh. So you're teaching, at there. So when you're talking about young
That's right.
people, what are the
teaching in
different
Bangladesh.
nationalities that you're teaching?
Well, at the undergrad level, they are mostly Bangladeshis. At the graduate level, I have taught Nepalis and Sri Lankans and Chinese, and because for the graduate level of studies here, they attract students from Bhutan, all over the region. And so I get a chance to actually interact with them and teach with them and learn from them as well. So, now I forgot what I was talking about with my.
Oh, you were talking
students.
about that you're trying to, when you are dealing with these students, you're trying to educate them on just not necessarily through a Western lens, but
Yes,
through
exactly.
a multipolar lens. And I guess my question is, because you are American and you're teaching with English texts, I assume English speaking texts.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
What textbooks what reference do you use? You get to choose your own materials, your own curriculum.
Yes.
Do you get to create and shape that? That's amazing. So you can use Noam Chomsky, you can use others.
I can use anyone that I choose to use. And so I teach on the master's level. I, of course, teach leadership because that's my PhD is in leadership and change. So I also have to teach sort of the dynamics of change, how to make change. And for that course, I chose Amir Levy. And I chose him because he is a great thinker around how organizations, and I use Amir Levy for the organizational development and change course, but for the leadership course, I use a variety of writers. Not it changes from semester to semester based on the interests of the students. But for undergraduate, which is what I spend most of my time doing, the undergraduate students don't have a textbook. And you know what I tell them? I tell them the world is your textbook. So we actually take examples from the real world. And so I will look up something in a minute. So for example, somebody said something in class about Putin being a dictator, something.
Right.
And so I said, well, where did you get that? And he said, well, it's in my, it's in our newspapers, it's in our media. And so then I took them to, I said, you give me the media outlet. So they gave me the name of a particular newspaper. I said, okay, now let's go to the international section. So we go to the international section. And I said, now you pick the story here, the article that you want us to focus on. And I let them pick.
Right.
Without any, how can I say this? Without any deviation from this little experiment. And I teach 5 undergraduate courses, sections of one course. So then I get to work this little experiment 5 times. And guess what? Not a single time. So now these articles are all written by, and these are different because it's 5 different sections. It's 5 different news outlets, 5 different articles. And the news outlets that provide the local newspapers with this material, Agence France Presse, Associated Press, Reuters.
Right.
And so immediately I'm able to show them that everything you get in your newspaper is from the West. And so it's not unnatural for you to have these thoughts because no one has pointed out to you that you have been steeped in Eurocentrism. You are steeped in the West.
I mean, and when they want a message to get across, they use certain buzzwords that will get, for instance, in my case, right, international news. So India got the news. I'm sure Bangladesh did. Other countries in the East and in South America, all of it coming from AP, Reuters. So what were the 2 words they used? Tara Reade defected. She's a traitor. Traitor.
Oh,
defected,
wow.
Traitor, defected, traitor, defected. And it doesn't, the article would move around with some of the facts, but they kept those 2 words in the headline and there to grab. And those, and as you know, the Soviet Union fell in the 90s and 89 and
or was negotiated out of existence.
We are now in capitalism and there's no defection. And of course, I'm not a traitor. I'm still a U.S. citizen and I care about U.S. and I have family and friends there. And I worked there. I served my government there in different administrations. And it's amazing how, I mean, I'm using this as an example, how they curate the news now.
Yes.
It's not news, it's curated, pre-digested information.
That's right. That's right. And so therefore, that is it is purposely done in order to manipulate the way people think. Right. And of course, if you can control their thoughts, then you can control their bodies, you can control their behavior. And ultimately, that's what it's all about. So I have to kind of de-Westernize myself. I saw a term today in a article on Telegram, de-Americanize my students, because the West, the influence of the West is so pervasive on every kind of level. They can tell you so granted, I'm not so young in terms of the chronology of my years on this planet. So my examples might be a little bit old, okay? But they can tell you everything. I'll use this one because it's better. They can tell you everything about every aspect of what's her name? Uh, uh, Taylor Swift's life, right?
Right.
They can tell you all of that, but they can't tell you who the up and coming Bangladeshi singer is.
Right.
It's like they know everything about that. They know everything about the royal family. They know everything about this. And yet their knowledge of themselves is woefully inadequate.
Oh, that's
So
interesting. So they don't know their own culture, their own newsworthy events that are
that's right.
happening. Interesting.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So the late great anti-apartheid fighter Steve Biko
Hmm.
once said that the greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressors is the minds of the oppressed. And so who is that? Alex Jones talks about information wars, info
Hmm.
wars. And that's about where we are now. It might have been sort of out there when he first came up with that name, but
Hmm.
now that is basically what we are fighting, is an information war. And that's why outlets like yours are so important, so that people can get the opportunity to get a different point of view.
Yeah, I appreciate, I my podcast is run by some volunteers out of the US, with INN, Indie News Network. So Indie and Reeve, whom I really value, and Greg, and all
Oh,
of them.
okay.
They volunteer their time because I couldn't do the tech part, the editing and all of
Yeah.
that. So, they volunteer their time and make sure it gets out there, because there's so few truly. And when you say independent, I mean, I'm not, no one's, this
Yeah.
podcast is like not funded. And then
Yeah.
YouTube
Yeah.
demonetized it and takes down my videos. So, because
Uh,
sometimes they don't like who I have on. But
Oh, well, expect that maybe on this one.
but Cynthia, I wanted to come back to the fact. I mean, you have been a politician. You were a 6-term congressional member. You've worked in politics in some form most of your life.
hmm
And I have to
Yeah.
say, and because you and I are contemporaries, and I've been in politics a very long time as
hmm
well. I have to say, I feel, and this might sound existential, but I almost feel like I've never felt before. Like there's something, and I don't want to be too dualistic, but almost good and evil,
hmm
almost like there's a battle. It's a
hmm
battleground right now of
Yeah.
ideas that we're moving towards a future where
Yeah.
those who thought they were free are bound, and those who
hmm
thought they were bound are actually free. And
Free.
I've
That's right.
experienced this dichotomy in Moscow, Russia. And I wanted to ask
hmm
you about your impressions of the people of Russia and what you're bringing back to your students, because you were one of the international observers of the election. So I kind of wanted to
Yes.
see what your thoughts were about that and your experience.
Well, yeah. For me, it was an excellent experience because, of course, I've been involved in electoral politics
Mhm.
for basically all of my life, because before I became a member of the U.S. Congress, I was a member of the Georgia legislature, and my father was also a member of the Georgia legislature, and he was there for all ever since the passage, quite frankly, of the Voting Rights Act, which made it possible for African Americans to even think about getting elected in the South. It was
Mhm.
just my dad had run for office and run for office because he said that we need to stop begging for public policy. We need to start making public policy. And
There you
so
have it.
he ran before the the Voting Rights Act took effect
Mhm.
in Atlanta, Georgia, and he lost, and he ran again and he lost. And then there was the Voting Rights Act, and he ran and he won, and he just, and he was there like forever until he and I both ran afoul of some special interest group. But so the idea of coming and observing the elections in Russia was not far-fetched for me, because it was something that I knew. And it turns out, and I really have been so busy doing my activism that I honestly have not cataloged. People say, well, you need to write a book, or you need to do that and that and that and that. I really am so busy doing that I haven't had a chance to actually think about all of the things that I've been active in. So
Right.
one of those topics that I was at, because you see, my home state of Georgia was the very first state to roll out the electronic voting machines, the die-bowl machines. And then, of course, they used those machines to get me out because, I was not like the team player. Oh, I'm going to be with you in your sexual perversion, so you'll protect me. No. I didn't go to Vegas and play, the betting, which is what a lot of, I shouldn't say that, and do all the other stuff
Yeah,
that
I know what
members
they
of
do. I
Congress
worked
do.
for members of Congress. You know my story.
That's right.
Yeah,
You
I
worked
mean,
on the Hill.
there's debauchery. I mean, they have power, they have money, and so
Yes,
it's like they almost need the next high, the next endorphin level, right? Because they have
that's
all
right.
that, so they got to keep those endorphins coming, and they do corrupt things.
That's right.
And
That's
I
right.
mean, had you hung out with Nancy Pelosi, you'd be a multimillionaire, and right now you'd be telling me what stocks to invest
exactly. Exactly. And
you weren't
it's
hanging
like,
with her.
yeah, and I sat in on one of those meetings with what was the guy before Bernanke? I can't remember his name now. Can't remember his name, but the
Lauren
one who was
Hatch?
married to
Okay.
he was married to what was her name? She was a media person, very, very renowned media person, and her husband was the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Well, anyway, can't remember his name. Anyway, I was in one of those meetings, Tara, when they were dropping hints all over the place, telling them, invest in this, invest in that. So you're right. That's what happens. And if you become a part of that, then in fact, I had one guy call me and tell me, if you do this, they wanted me to do something that was a lie. And, I was raised that you don't tell a lie. I mean, I that's the way I was raised. And so I said, no, I can't do that because it's not true. But if I had done that, he told me that they would put me on the cover of Time and Newsweek magazine, and I'd be in Congress for the rest of my life. I had that offer. I had another offer. Another offer was some president in Africa. He liked me, and I don't know if he liked me or if he liked what I talked about. I'm assuming he liked what I talked about, but that didn't necessarily have to be. Well, anyway, this guy calls himself a prince. He's Prince somebody, and maybe he really was a prince, because he was European, spoke with a heavy kind of Austrian or German, some kind of accent. And he said, I will take you, to the country. I won't say the name of the country. I will take you there. He likes you. Well, I didn't go.
Yeah.
I didn't go, Well, turns out a few years later, that guy jumps off a building. So maybe, he was supposed to turn because I was too freewheeling, freestyling, too, and somebody needed to rein me in. Yeah. And it wasn't him. He jumped off a building. So anyway, these things do happen. That place is a place that compromises your values. Now, at first, I used to think that you have very good people who decide to run for office, and then they go to Washington, so they leave home. The family is home. They're in Washington by themselves. They're lonely, and then they fall into temptation, something innocent like that. But nowadays, you know what I get the impression of? That these people are not there for principles and values and to make the lives of their constituents, but they're there for themselves.
Well, yeah, and they're there and to make a lot of money, and to get a lot of power. Yeah,
that's right.
Exactly. And, meeting you and some of the other international observers, talking with Caleb Maupin, for example, and some others, I met what I found fascinating, and you and I both were following this at the same time. We're part of this chat group, is how much censorship is happening in Australia. and corruption and with their politicians. And so the Western values have kind of, gone down under, if you will. Their reach is all the way there. So we got to know Adrian McCrae, who was amazing, sweet, very kind person, just really earnestly interested. He had no opinions coming here to Moscow from what he shared with me. He really just wanted to see how the election worked. And he's an entrepreneur and has other businesses. And he also happens to be a city councilman. So when he went back and spoke highly about his what he saw and that he was amazed and kind of cut through the propaganda, wow, what happened to him? What were your thoughts about what happened to Adrian?
Oh, I watched that whole proceeding live because I couldn't. I mean,
they tried to remove him from office. Yeah, they tried with a no confidence vote. Yeah.
Well, it would have been a no confidence vote. It would have ended the matter there, but then they would have used it in his his subsequent campaign to get him out of office. So I was following this very closely because his impressions and my impressions were the same. I mean, I know what the weaknesses are of the U.S. Election system. Believe me, I can tell you. And what I saw in Russia was that the Russian election administration system goes from strength to strength to strength. And I did this deep dive on what the perfect election would look like with election integrity in the United States. And I went and I interviewed a whole bunch of different people. I had even forgotten I did this. And there was one lawyer in Virginia who came up with what I thought was the most innovative and the most fundamentally basic foundation for having elections with integrity in the U.S. Now, one of the things that he talked about is that there has to be citizen oversight. You cannot have election administration run by bureaucrats. It must be run by the citizens themselves. And I go to Russia, and what do I see? Citizens themselves running the elections and sitting inside every polling place. I visited about 18 polling places, and there were citizens running them and citizens who were serving as what we would call poll watchers. So you have the poll workers. In the US, we have poll workers and poll watchers. So the poll workers are average ordinary citizens with their eyes wide open. And the poll workers are average ordinary citizens with their eyes wide open.
And what's interesting too, Cynthia, I don't know whether you tracked on this, was the fact that they make it a holiday to vote. Whereas in the US, and I don't know about other Western countries, but I assume it's the same, you just do it around your work schedule, whatever. But
That's right.
And of course they don't allow mail-in. They don't allow that in Russia. You've got to show up in person. So
that's right. Or you use the app.
Yes.
Do electronic voting. Then if you do use the app, guess what? It goes to blockchain. Yes. So now if you can run a whole cryptocurrency on blockchain, my goodness. And I remember in the early days of cryptocurrency, I was around these anarchist types. And they were talking about, it'd be wonderful if we could use blockchain with our voting system, right? And everybody was saying, well, it's not possible. Well, I just left Russia in March of 2024 where they used blockchain. They did it successfully. It's amazing. So
for our audience that may not really understand the blockchain, what we're saying is, like, for instance, with crypto and the reason why, there's controversy around crypto is that it's very difficult to trace. So in other words, with blockchain, it's really locked down and difficult to hack. So very difficult.
It's difficult to hack. That's right. Although, your blockchain can be public. But then, and many of the cryptocurrency blockchains are public, but then you got to know, well, if you're like using Monero or I don't even know if Dash is still around, but, if you're using one of those, then you can't. The transaction shows up, but the owner of the transaction remains anonymous. They have
Right.
their way of doing that.
Right. Yeah.
So now we went into the room. Another difference is that there are at least 2 cameras in every polling station. And those cameras run 24/7 for the entire 3 days of voting. Voting day, 1 day, but then they have early voting for 2 days. So it's 15th, 16th, 17th of March, and 17th being the actual voting day. But half of the people had already voted before the 17th. And some of those votes were done using the app on the people's devices, their laptop. We saw a video of Putin voting on his desktop.
Yeah.
And people use their device, their cell phone or whatever. And that is then what is logged on the blockchain. You can't erase the blockchain, right?
Right.
So you know that your vote was tallied. Now, when I go and I vote in the United States, well, the problem is that a significant number of those votes never get counted. How do they never get counted? Because they are ruled invalid or some kind of way. And usually it's some kind of trickery. And then, of course, with the introduction of the electronic voting machines, they break down a lot. Okay. So
yeah, and they
in Georgia,
spit out a bunch of ballots and do that. Yeah.
So in Georgia, the electronic voting machine break down a lot. So, it was like I lost my election after the electronic voting machine broke down. The excuse is that the electronic voting machines don't perform well in heat. Well, now, anybody who knows Georgia, the entire month of July is what? Over 90 degrees.
Exactly.
It's hot. Right. Yeah. So you knowingly and corruptly, I will add, because I was involved in this from the computer software people who came to me when they started talking about these machines. And so I've been involved on this issue. I've seen them hacked. And now, just to get this in before our time runs up, in Georgia, we have been saddled with a quote unquote president who is not really our elected president, because the activists from the 2020 election have discovered 100,000 paper ballots that did not have a chain of custody form attached to them. 100,000.
100,000. That's a lot. That's a city.
A lot. That's more. That's right. And the margin between Trump and Biden was only what, 12,000 or so. It
was very, very small.
And if you go to, I literally watch, because this is kind of stuff. It's not like, I'm a junkie for elections, but I've just been through so much. I know what a fake election looks like.
Yeah.
And because it's been done to me. So then I turn in, I look in Michigan, and you can actually see the ballots being delivered after, late at night.
Yeah.
Everything's supposedly shut down.
After they've already called the election.
Ballots.
Yeah.
Okay. Then, of course, you got Pennsylvania. So you tell me that the United States has any room whatsoever to criticize anybody's elections.
I know. And here we are coming up on 2024. And speaking of which, I wanted, before we closed our show, because our time's coming to a close here, I wanted to ask you about Ukraine. And you saw the 90 billion that just got shoved through by the Uniparty, by both Republicans and Democrats, for more defense spending in Gaza, giving aid to Israel to commit that genocide of Palestinians. And just, and now, of course, what's happening right now, that Israel's doing its thing, and people are, there's all these protests, but people are looking at the protests, but they're not looking at what's happening as more Palestinians are being slaughtered right now by Israel and Rafah. So you have that. And then you have money going to Ukraine, like 60 billion, right? Meanwhile,
Yeah.
the Department of Defense, after their sixth audit, lost trillions of dollars, can't account for it,
Yeah.
billions in Ukraine, which, I would check underneath Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer's bed. That's where I first looked.
Yeah.
Biden's bed, and you might find a few
Yeah.
million there, right? Or with
That's
his
right.
brother. So this is a corrupt money laundering scheme. And then, of course,
Yes.
they have some money allocated to Taiwan. So you saw 75% of Americans were against this, and yet Congress put it through. And I guess I wanted your opinion about that. Because that's really important that we're, because it's heading towards World War III.
Yes. In fact, I tell my students that, you show me where we don't have hot war, and then I will tell you that we are already in World War III. And World War III started actually as soon as World War II ended. So because I think that regime change operations and coups and all of the things that the West carried out against those states that were just trying to find a way to rid themselves of colonialism and neo-colonialism. That's a war. That's a war that is not between European states. It's a war of the European states against non-European states. And so that's a war nonetheless, because that continues to this day, and people were killed. People were destroyed, their lives were destroyed. Right. So at any rate, also I just say, you get figures like Dick Cheney coming to the Congress and saying, you can expect war for the next 60 years. Well, that's World War. You drop depleted uranium bombs on Pakistan, and you drop depleted uranium in Iraq, and that air circulates with that depleted uranium in it. That's war on the rest of us as well. So,
it's
we've
cancer
been involved.
Causing, it's hugely toxic. Exactly.
That's right. That's right. So we have been engaged in World War III right after World War II. So now, what do I think about Ukraine? Well, everyone, I did so much research on the Rwanda genocide. And basically, when I did that research, I demanded that there be an independent investigation of the role of the United Nations Department of Peacekeeping Operations, because they abdicated their responsibility to protect they were deployed there, and then they were Belgian peacekeepers, and then they, sort of ran away and let things happen. So, but in the end, it was all planned. It was a massive regime change operation hatched in the bowels of the United States Pentagon.
Right.
So it bears some semblance to what's going on.
I agree with you to a point, but I think that this one has more to do with coming up against another nuclear power, the way NATO has done that. But I think this one has more to do with money laundering and corruption. I think it has, because more money, because, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, some of these weapons manufacturers, when they're reporting their profits over the last 2.5 years, it's 5 times what it was. 5 times.
I know that.
They are making so many millions.
In the billions. They've been making millions. They've been making millions off of other people's tragedies for a long time. They made a whole lot of millions.
Rwanda was like the blueprint.
No. Yeah. No. Rwanda was a part of U.S. policy. Okay? And now, if you want to look at Ukraine, you have to look at no. It's also a part that people make money off of the policy, but the policy is to run NATO all the way up to destroy and then colonize Russia.
Yeah, you're right.
That's the policy.
Absolutely.
That's the policy.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now, by any means necessary, you do that. And that is what they're doing. So I'm not going to separate the effect from the policy. The policy is to destroy and then colonize Russia, and Ukraine just happens to be the place. Now, who's going to benefit? It's not me. It's not you.
Nope.
It's not my mother. It's not my next door neighbor. But there are people who benefit. So I have my students now looking at policy and who benefits from the policy. So now we've created a template, and I call this my template for global social control. And what we're trying to do now is put names on the faces of the people who sit at the table of global social control. Once we're able to do that, we've identified our enemy, and then we can fight them.
There you go. What an intriguing conversation. And for people that want to follow you, do you have a public Telegram channel or any kind of public social media that people can check you out?
Well, I'm definitely on Telegram, and the name of that Telegram channel is Target Identified. That channel beeps all day and all night because I'm doing this thing 24/7. So I would recommend that people just mute it so you don't get the bings, but you definitely will get the information. In fact, one person from Kashmir sent me a message saying, I'm in university from your Telegram channel. So that's what I want, is to always be able to provide an alternative point of view, another way of looking at things. I learn so much from my students. My students hopefully are learning from me, and I learn from everyone that I engage with, because in the end of the day, none of us knows everything, but we sure can know a lot if we put our brains together.
Oh, thank you. Those are wise words, Cynthia. It's so good to spend time with you. You were on my show. It was a couple years now ago, and one last thought before you leave, and I know I've held you on here, but just one more thought. Because it was kind of a historic thing. Jill Stein had a bicycle pushed against her and was arrested. She was at a pro-Palestinian march, trying to bring awareness of the genocide that's happening, that the U.S. is funding. And she was harmed. I mean, because she's 76 years old, I believe. And they are charging her not just with, protesting, they're charging her with assault on a police officer. That's very serious. So I wanted to know if you'd heard about that, because you've been involved with the Green Party, and what your thoughts are about all of a sudden now they're charging for assault on a police officer, when if you watch the video, she was getting assaulted.
Well, here's the thing, and they always have to take this aggressive positioning so that they can prevent later on their victim from filing a suit against them for false whatever, and so that's what I think this is. So now Jill is in the unenviable position of having to get a lawyer, and you know what I mean. So
it's
this
thousands
is
of dollars. Yep,
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So it's all calculated. They know what they're doing. They hit you in the pocketbook one way or the other, and they sanction in such a way the bad behavior of people like us who act from conscience.
Well, thank you again for being on the show and all your wisdom. And of course, down below, Reade, thank you, my producer who puts all this together with Indy. Thank you for putting Cynthia's information and ways to get in touch with her underneath. And I'm sure you'll have lots of questions and reach out. And I really appreciate your time. So thank you so much, Cynthia. You take care.
I look forward to coming back. Bye.
Bye.